Hi, I'm Sonia. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going a little bit into a fantasy world. We're going to discuss the topic of fantasy self, having one and getting rid of one, obviously in context of clutter and minimalism, and I will do my best to share a little bit of my story again and then share some tips on how you can actually analyze if you are suffering from too much fantasy in your life as well. But before we jump into today's video, I want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. You guys really made my whole week. I think I have 40 new subscribers since the last video, and thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching the previous video on minimalism. Everybody who left a comment, you guys, literally some of the comments really touched me. All of them obviously warmed my heart, and thank you for taking time to watch the video to the very end and then taking time to leave a comment. If you're interested and if you're seeing this face for the first time, I plan to talk, this is the second video, but I plan to talk about topics like minimalism, decluttering, and some other stuff that are also important to me, like branding and ikigai, a very fancy, lovely Japanese word. So if you're into that, please subscribe and let's go. When I was 16 years old, more or less, Sex and the City series was just being released, and me and my friends, my girlfriends, we were all binge watching. And just a little bit of a context, back in the 2000s and 90s, binge watching meant that you would watch one episode per week of your favorite series, but you would not miss it for anything in the world. It was very important. Like, from this standpoint, I was not aware of that back then, but it really shaped my identity. I would identify with the girls the characters were around 30 years old back then, and I was just 16. But I remember that I had this idea that when I am 30 down the road, I would consider myself successful and happy if I was wearing one of the shoes or living in New York, etc. So it heavily affected my identity, and I was not aware of it up until I actually was in my 30s. And in the meantime, I struggled financially. Serbia back then was in a economic transitioning from one economic system or socioeconomic system to another. We were just entering capitalism, and in that process both of my parents lost their jobs. The disparity between who I was becoming and this identity that I have formed based on a series, which now that I'm saying it really sounds crazy, but I'm telling you that's what happened, and I think it happened for a lot of us. That disparity was becoming bigger, and it was quite hard for me when I actually turned 30, and I was just basically starting to live a little bit more decent life. But I was far from what I imagined that I would be, like who I thought I would be, because this who was heavily based on what I had, and this is, now we're coming back to minimalism and clutter. So I would identify myself with the possessions I had, and not maybe just possessions but also experiences, because it was just, there was barely a beginning of social media, but we were living our best lives and sharing it on social media, and then it exploded in the following years. I still had this idea of this girl, this woman that I was supposed to become. And funny thing is that I studied philosophy. So one of the many things that you get to learn or get to become if you study philosophy is that you get to become this critical thinker. And I don't know how I was able to critically think about everything except about my fantasy self. I took it for granted. It was so heavily ingrained into who I thought I was, in the idea of self. And to cut a very long story short, in the last couple of years, and I have to thank clutter for that, I started noticing how I was accumulating some of the things that were representing the fantasy self, and I did not enjoy them at all, but I was still not able to fully afford the whole version of fantasy self. So it got me thinking. I would buy high heels, and I'm not a high heel girl. The fantasy version of myself, or of course she is. It was the heels that got me thinking, okay, is this somebody that I really am? Or did somebody tell me that I am worthy only if I wear heels, or that I'm classy, or that I'm stylish? The most important word being successful if I wear heels. And the second thing is, for example, my fantasy version, or the fantasy version of myself, I would always imagine myself in full makeup, you know, like really done hair and makeup. I don't wear that much makeup. 90% of the time I don't wear any makeup, and if I do wear full makeup, this is how it looks. This is my full makeup look. So, you know, I'm not a makeup kind of a girl. And the third thing, and I would always end up buying all these curling irons and whatnot. Fantasy version of myself, she has this long, luscious, curly, or curls, you know, not like curly hair, but she would, you know, like waves and curls. And the true me, I hate when hair is touching my face. That's why I always keep it in the back. I had short hair most of my life. This is me in a phase. I'm finally growing my hair to see if I like it or not. But yeah, but it's not the things that are the problem here. It's that I tied my identity, or more importantly, my feeling of worthiness and my feeling of success, to this fantasy version that is not even who I actually am. She's not the better version of me. She's someone else's version of me. And that meant that I would keep all of this stuff around my house, thinking that one day, when I'm really successful, when I'm really at it, that's when I'm gonna wear those heels, that's when I'm gonna use that curling iron or whatnot. Never happened, and I was just feeling miserable and guilty for not using those things. So, and I don't know, tell me if this resonates. Please leave a comment if you were, while you were listening to me, if you had, you know, like, oh, I know exactly, like I have this thing in my house or in my mind that is actually not who I really am. It's just representing this fantasy version of myself, but not the real version of myself, just somebody else's version. Okay, so how can you do this as well if you want to? I recognized, and I made notes, so that's why I'm looking down. I noticed like 3 steps or 3 things that you might need to go through to be able to fully let go of fantasy self. And at the end of the video, I'm going to explain to you why I believe that is actually important, or what is the value of ditching the fantasy self. So the first thing, or where I would start today, and actually I am right now entering a new phase of analyzing the remains of fantasy self, is that I would analyze clutter. I would actually spend some time analyzing clutter, and I would do my best to realize, why am I keeping these things around the house? The ones that I am keeping, and the ones that I consider to be clutter. So I would analyze it. I would spend some time, you know, analyzing the stuff that I have. And I would analyze, sorry, my cat. So I would do my best to realize if this is representing the values that I still believe in, or if it's representing something else. if it's a reflection, if the reason that I'm still keeping something rooted in some healthy emotion, or if it's rooted in some unhealthy emotion. So I would analyze this. Just basically keep notes, pick an item or two, analyze it, make notes, pick another item or two, analyze, make notes. And then the second thing is to actually go through a test period where you would do your best to use this item. And I am, for example, giving myself a period of a month of 30 days to use these items daily. And I'm not being judgmental toward myself. I'm doing my best to use them. If I don't use them for 3 days in a row, all good. Maybe I will use it on the 4th one and then on the 5th one, but not on the 6th and the 7th. Doesn't matter. I will make my decision at the end of this 30-day period. After you do your best to use or lose this thing, or use it, we're now coming into the losing part of it. After you first analyze it, then spend some time actually doing your best to use it. See if it's fear or fantasy that is stopping you from using it. And I'm gonna use an example of this camera that I'm using right now to record this video. I have had this camera for about a year now, and I seldomly use it. I started using it in the past couple of months, like 2 or 3 months, doing photography. The reason why I bought this camera was to make these kind of videos. I just never did it. And the reason why I was not using the camera is because of fear. I was fearing not the camera, obviously, and not the recording itself, but you know, uploading the videos and then seeing how audience would react. This is where the actual self, your actual self, gets to emerge and shine, and you get to become a better version of yourself. Because if you are trying to become somebody that you truly honestly feel on the inside that you are, you're gonna do everything that you can to actually do that, to go through the process. If you're trying to become the better version by somebody else's standards, and especially if that's not aligned with your values and what you believe inside, in the very core of your being to be true or good, I don't think, I think we are quite self-protective in that sense. So maybe your clutter is actually protecting you from your fantasy self. Let me know. That's why I said we're not fully ditching ourselves. We're just ditching the fantasy versions of ourselves that were created by someone else, not by us. So I still believe in creating, fantasizing about the better version of yourself, as long as it is really coming from the inside of you, not from the magazine, not from the movie, not from the series, not from your mom, from your best friend, or whoever, from yourself.